Hello and welcome back to another live stream. So, um, today we have. Okay, good. It's all working. So, today is another reaction stream. Just some antinatalist content online, like the other two. So I think this is the third one. I'm pretty sure I put it in the title. What number it is, anyway. But I hope everyone is doing well. If you are already in the Kashev's already in the chat. Kashev is asking if I checked metaphysical exile. Sorry, it's early in the morning, so yeah, my mouth is obviously not working yet, or my voice, or my brain. Yeah, yeah, I did. I mean, I've known who metaphysical exile is for a while. So yeah, don't worry. I've got him covered on that front. I haven't reached out to him because I've just got a few things coming up. I need to do a bit more research, stuff like that. But yeah, don't worry, Kashev. Like I'll reach out to metaphysical exile at some point, for something. So, on my part, that will happen. Obviously, it's up to him whether he wants to do anything. But yeah, no worries. Cool. Okay, so again, like last time, I've basically just got this ongoing playlist, right? And there's a range of stuff in there this time. So this time we've got someone going over Benatar's asymmetry. We're going to watch a video about that. We're going to watch about a entrepreneur influencer talking about why he thinks having kids is selfish, and that's not really an antinatalist one, or not as far as I'm aware. I'd be surprised if it was, but because he's quite well known, I thought it would be interesting to watch. We've got a call-in show run by Matt Dillahunty called The Line, which an antinatalist rung into. And a bunch of stuff. So we'll see how much we get through. But I think there's going to be some interesting stuff. So yeah, I hope everyone is well. If you're already watching, then say hello in the chat to let me know who's here. It'd be nice to see who's around, and also remember to click the like button as well, because it promotes the video. So I don't think there's anything else for me really to say at the start. I think people don't want me to dilly-dally. So this is hey, Medcos is here, and I'm not sure how to say that. Viganja. But yeah, either way, obviously I know who you are. And Brecken as well. So hey everyone. So yeah, the first one is actually a clip of this. Right, the vegan version of the Avengers. So it's the Vavengers. Yeah, okay, cool. Yeah. I'm not sure how I would actually pronounce it, but I get what you mean. Yeah, so this first one is with this guy. So some of you may have heard of him. I think he's quite well known. So he's called Alex Hormozy. So basically he is like well, he started out as like an entrepreneur, and now he's morphed into like an influencer, social media personality entrepreneur. So I don't know an amazing amount about him, but my understanding is that he became wealthy through setting up a specific form of system for setting up gyms, like gymnasiums where people go to exercise in America. And he set up this system where like he could just open up one after the other. And I don't know the details of the system. Futile's here as well. Hey, Futile. Um, yeah, I don't know the details of the system, but basically he became rich through that, is my understanding. Um, and then he started having a social media presence, talking about all the things that he's learned through that process. And now he's like an entrepreneur communicator. So he does a lot of content online talking about tips and tricks on how to grow a business and, changes in mindset and stuff like that. So, yeah, anyway, so he has gotten to a point now where quite a few people are getting him on podcasts, and I guess he's on this podcast, and they happened to ask him about the topic of having kids. So I thought it'd be someone. I think someone sent it to me, or maybe I just randomly come across it. I can't actually remember, but it'll be interesting to see. Zaki is here as well. Um, Zaki's asking, is that Graham Stefan to the right of him? I have no idea who Graham Stefan is, so it could be. I don't know who these two people are, but Alex Hormozy isn't in shot yet. He's the other side. This is his hand here. But anyway, I reckon we can start. Obviously, let me know if there's any audio issues.
After our podcast last time, unfortunately, we talked about this off camera, but you mentioned that you want to get rid of all of your money. Like when you die, you're not going to pass it on to your kids or anything.
Yeah.
There's a pledge or something for that?
Well, I mean, there's the giving pledge, but we already donated our states have already been set up to be given away. I haven't signed any pledges for it, but yeah.
So actually, that's not antinatalism related, but that's like interesting. They talk about the giving pledge. So that's like an informal name for it. It's a pledge set up by Give What We Can. So I actually didn't know that he was interested in effective altruism and that sort of stuff. So actually that, is like a pleasant surprise, because this man is going to be like, he will have a large amount of wealth already, but he's going to accumulate a lot of wealth in his life. And I think if we're going to live in a system where people can accumulate wealth, then like it's obvious, it seems like the best case scenario to me that those people who have accumulated the wealth use it in an actual conscious way to do good, which, and it's good that he's actually thinking that way. So basically he's saying that he's going to give all of his stuff over his lifetime away, or when him and his wife die, they'll give it all away. And actually I had seen the first bit of this clip before. I haven't seen the whole thing, so I've only seen what we've watched now. The rest of it I don't know. But because I got this tab up already, just to show you guys what it is. So basically, this is the Giving What We Can pledge. Let me just get it down so you can see see Giving What We Can. So basically, it's a pledge where you pledge to give 10% of your, people interpret it different ways. I mean, it basically all works out to be the same anyway. But it's like either you give 10% of like your monthly earnings every year, every year or month, or you give 10% of all of the capital and wealth you accumulate over your lifetime. A minimum of 10% you give that away to high impact charitable causes. So I don't know exactly what charities he's chosen to do, but this is a pledge people can take. I know a range of people have already taken it. I've taken it, and like obviously it's not legally binding. It's just if you take it, you've got this psychological response of like, oh, I've taken a pledge now, and you tell other people you've taken the pledge, and it helps hold you accountable and stuff. But they have a range of charities, and obviously people watching this will be interested in charities that pertain to birth rates, right? And there is one charity that they rank a whole range of charities, and you can set up an account with them and just have easy direct debits that go to these charities that have been rated to be high impact. And what there are a range of them that an antinatalist would have no conflict with donating to. There are animal ones, there are ones that improve humans' lives in ways that don't seem like they would increase the amount of kids they have. But one that is actually aimed on human reproduction is called family empowerment media. So I'll try and remember to include a link to them in the description, but yeah, check them out because they could be worth supporting. Anyway, let's get back to the clip.
It's, I mean, well, I guess we're gonna get into it. So, it's just that like so I'll tell you a really interesting example that'll drive this home. This is recent. So my great grandfather was he was a ruler in Iran prior to the Shah. And so we were like, I'm directly descendant from him. Now that sounds fancy. It doesn't mean anything, which is going to prove my point. He had 400 children.
Whoa, that guy is like the enemy of antinatalist. That's mad. 400, Jesus.
From those 400 children was my great grandfather. He was one of 19. Then there was my grandfather. Then there's my dad, and then there's me, right? And so he was a ruler of a country. So you talk about like wealth and status and everything, right? I actually can't even remember his name. And so that's just 5 generations. And so the idea that we have of like, I want to like create a legacy. It's like, dude, you're not making a legacy. He was ruler of a country.
This guy seems to have a very level-headed approach to legacies because, I mean, I haven't heard everything he's got to say, but the idea that people have about like procreating is going to leave them a legacy, I mean, in no meaningful way is it? Like, let's say your kid is that 1 in a million, you know, and you give birth to Gandhi or Martin Luther King or Abraham Lincoln, you know, or Mary Shelley, like someone whose name is going to be remembered for many, many years. Not forever, but many, many, many years, right? They will become like a common name that people know. A vanishingly small chance that that will happen. Even if it does, no one remembers the parents of those people. Like, who can name Mary Shelley's parents? Or who can name Gandhi's parents or Martin Luther King's parents? The only time we'd be able to name the parents of someone who's really famous is because their parents also independently became famous in and of themselves. No one becomes famous just because they're the parent of someone who's famous. So, and also underlying this whole thing is that it's just ego-driven as well. So, like, yeah, this idea of a legacy is just seems insane to me. The best form of legacy I can see is leaving the world a better place when you leave it than when you came into it. Even if it's a nameless impact, right? No one needs to know you made that impact. But that seems like the best legacy because it's actually having a positive, tangible impact on those who will come after you, who exist also while you exist, right? That seems like the best sort of legacy, and it can be a named legacy. People can know who you are. That's fine. You know, no one's going to hate on someone who has a massive impact on the world, and we remember their name. You know, like there's no point in hating. You know, that's fine. But it's not the fact that we remember their name that is actually the thing. It's the actual impact that you've had. So yeah, I agree with this guy. Like this guy's what was it? Great grandfather or whatever ruled a country. Who's going to remember his name? Like, he doesn't even remember his name, and he's a direct descendant. But yeah, anyway, let's see what he says.
I can't even remember his name. I'm related to him, right? And so, you know, if you do that enough times, it just becomes humans, right? Like the difference, and that becomes a very like humanitarian perspective too, because if you mix bloodlines enough times, it's just people, right? And you take your genes, split them, you do it 10 times, you know, half to the 10th power is very, very small number, right? In terms of what percentage of it is still you, if you still have like pride in your biology being passed on, which also gets into like having children versus not having children, because then that's a whole nother like interesting can of worms. But as a result of that kind of thought process, the point of leaving a legacy in like capital L legacy of like, this is going to last past me, doesn't really make sense, because the people who I'm leaving it to will never know who I am. And it will get divided so many times as well between all of those people. It would have to be such an insane amount of money, which then would become a marginal amount of money once it's divided enough times. So for both of those reasons, it wouldn't work. But then on the close knit basis of like, well, I want to pass it on to my direct descendants, I just don't know many people who have been given lots of money who are better for it. And so for that reason, it doesn't seem very beneficial to anything to give it to anyone besides just giving it back to everybody else. And it's also kind of nice because it kind of relieves you of this pressure, because then it's just realized.
Brecken, also Dan Bright is in the chat as well. Hey, Dan Bright. Brecken saying money, generational wealth has a way of preserving a legacy's forgotten even. What do you mean by that, Brecken? Are you able to expand? Just send another message in the chat and let us know what you mean, because I don't quite follow what you mean.
It for what it is, which is it's just a game, right? Like what we're playing right now is just a made up game to keep us occupied. And so these are just I gave.
Exactly, yeah. It's this made up dream to keep us occupied, a made up ego driven dream. People are just chasing the idea of a legacy because they hate the fact that because they're so important, is gonna they're not gonna be around anymore. Rather than, let's just focus on not me. Let's focus on what impact can I have. And Fig Antichrist is in the chat. Not exactly sure who he's calling a cuck, but we'll smooth over that. Cammy's in the chat as well. Hey, Cammy. Dan Bright says there's this romantic idea of creating someone who is part of you and part of the person you love most. That's the one thing that stops me from 100% choosing not to have children. There is this romantic idea as well. I think I'm just trying to think where it comes from. Like, it may be partly biological, but it will also be cultural as well. But like the thing that I'm sure you've heard this before, Dan, right? But the thing that I would say if that is the thing that's holding you back from not 100% choosing not to create someone else, is just like, the fundamental point is that you will be making a decision to and like I won't point this directly at you, it's just, this is a general point, right? This goes for anyone. If someone chooses to create someone else so that they can benefit from this idea that they have instilled themselves with someone else into a third person, not only does that only go to serve their ego and their own interests, so it is like, even though people dress it up in this romantic way and it feels all lovey-dovey, it is fundamentally just a selfish thing. It's just a self-serving thing. But it's also something that's self-serving and causes harm to someone else and gives them a death sentence as well. So it's like, it's fine to do things that serve your own interests if they don't have this negative impact on others. But when you're doing something to serve your own interests and it has a negative impact on others, that's when you've got to take into consideration the impact it has on them. Sorry, I sneezed. Cammy's saying, keep up the great work, Lawrence. Thanks so much, Cammy. And yes, I will keep it up. And Zaki saying, bless you, thank you. Brecken is saying a bit more. He says he may not remember. Well, actually, I don't know if Brecken is a he, but he may not remember his father, but that could be by ignorance, not necessarily a demerit. The means he has to create his own legacy may be derivative of his patriarch's legacy, ironically. Right, okay, so it's like, I think what you're saying, Brecken, is that regardless of whether or not you remember a person, the legacy is not just in the remembrance of the name or the person, it's also in the opportunities they provided to future people. So, for example, the reason that, and it may not be the case with this guy, but just for the sake of argument, it may be that the reason he is able to even go on this podcast and have done all the things that would have led him onto it and all the opportunities may be because he was a descendant of this person, which would be a legacy. Yeah. So, and Brecken's saying, yeah, that's what they mean. Yeah, I agree with you, and I think that is the type of legacy that I was talking about before. It's not trying to create a legacy that will serve your own ego, but a legacy that will benefit others. Now, obviously, I would say don't create new people and like help benefit the people who exist now and who will exist regardless of your actions in the future. But if you're going to create people, then like assuming you are, it's also good to include them in, you know, your positive impact. So yeah, I think we're on the same page there, Brecken. Cool. Okay, let's continue. Oh, that's kind of annoying actually. So I've just got a bit of a runny nose.
The casino analogy at the end of the last podcast, but that is how I see it. It's like we're just accumulating chips. They're fake, and I can't take them with me, so I'm just pushing them back to the middle of the table, which is what they're going to be done anyways. It's just whether you say like they're only going to these players rather than all the players. Mm-hmm. But like fast forward 3 more generations, it is all the players, and you don't know the people anyways.
Yeah.
So like, what does it really matter?
Do you want?
To be fair, that's a very level-headed approach to it. Cool. Oh, I'm just thinking. Yeah. Anyway.
Kids. You mentioned, you know, the time commitment of a dog.
Yeah.
You're like, well, you know, it's too much. I can't imagine a child.
Yeah. I think I would probably have different feelings about a child than I would about a dog. And just so the audience can dislike me. So this is my gift for everybody.
Just while you linger on the anticipation of knowing what everyone's going to hate him for, I'm going to very quickly go to get a tissue to wipe my nose with. So I'll be right back. Right, I'm back. Okay, let's continue.
We had a dog, and it just went to the bathroom like 8 or 10 times a day, and it was too much. It was too much.
Source that. Couldn't you?
I could have.
Somebody.
Did you care for the dog?
Like, oh yeah, I actually really like animals, and actually animals really like me. It's kind of weird.
Bailey goes crazy.
So I'm pretty sure this guy is not vegan, but he should 100% be vegan. He'd be such a good advocate because he breaks the. So one, I mean, he loves animals already. Not that you need to love animals to be vegan, but it definitely helps you make the connection. But also, it would be great to have this guy as a vegan because one, he's got a big platform, you know. Not that I think he should talk about it all the time because he's grown his platform on a particular message. And if he switches to just talking about veganism 100% of the time, then it can lose you your audience, you jeopardize your audience. But to drop messages in amongst his usual content. But also another thing is that the type of audience he has garnered very likely won't be vegan to a significant degree, so he'll be reaching a new audience, and also he breaks the stereotype of what people think vegans are. Like when people think of vegans, they don't think of big business-minded, entrepreneurial, muscly men, right, with a big beard. They don't think of that. Now there are vegans like that, but that's not the stereotype. So it'd be really good to have him as like a vegan, like an animal rights advocate. But yeah, to be honest, I'm not hopeful about whether whether anyone has even been able to reach him to say that. Cool. And the Vegan Avenger, I'm just going to call you that now. The Vegan Avenger says, similar to when I talk about veganism, when talking about antinatalism, I like to say I understand why people used to do it, but when you know better, you have a moral obligation not to. Yeah, it's like when people are living in ignorance, they don't have a justification, but they have an excuse, right? Not it's an excuse as to why they've been doing it because they didn't know any better. Yeah, but once you know, right? So
When you get in the house.
But like it's like Layla's like, you have calming energy or whatever. You know what I mean? I don't know. But like animals do like me and I like them back. Like we're cool. Like we get along. But maybe it's because they know that I'm like, I don't need them.
They know you, but you don't need them.
You know, like I was like, you're
oh wait, he doesn't eat animals, so maybe he is vegan. What the fuck? So this is from a year ago. This is so weird. I'm just gonna look up Alex Hormozy vegan. Alex Hormozy diet revealed.
I've eaten dessert for
Yeah, I can't really see. I can't really see anything anywhere. About him being vegan, but yeah, we'll see. I mean, maybe he's vegetarian, or I don't know. Does anyone in the chat know? I don't know. Sorry if I'm getting like fixated on this, but like, I just think it would be really cool to have him as like a vegan. But
animal,
Chase.
I'm an animal. We're both just like doing our own thing. Like I don't need to take care of you. You can take care of
Right.
yourself.
You know what? You need
know
a
what I mean?
cat, though.
I loved the cat I had. We had a cat and it died after 2 years. But cats were way easier. So dogs versus cats, like I like the cat. Goldfish would work, you know, whatever.
Yeah.
But anyways, back to the kid thing.
oh right, Zaki's just put in the chat that apparently when you search what does Alex Hormozy eat every day, it says beef in it. When's that answer from though? Because so this is from a year ago. Yeah, interesting. Maybe he made the switch recently. I don't know.
It's something I've given a ton of thought to. The pros for me of having a child are the human experience, which is just like, this is a part of the human experience that is unique. And I think that would be interesting to go through. That being said, going to prison is also part of the.
Yeah, Vegan Avenger is just saying that he reminds her of Alex Bez, an activist. Yeah, he does look like him actually, to be fair. But obviously, this guy he looks like a lot bigger version. But yeah, I get what you mean.
Well, human experience, it doesn't necessarily mean that I should do it. You know, sometimes people are like, I think you and Layla would make great parents. And I'll say this, and I say this not as a pejorative statement to parenting in general, but I'm using.
Yeah, I mean, Brecken's talking about protein. I mean, like there are loads of ways. Like obviously, to get that big, anyone that big would obviously be eating loads, and like loads of protein powders and stuff like that. Oh, and John's just put in the chat saying, I think he said I don't need them, not I don't eat them. Okay, that's that may be the case. Maybe I misheard as well.
An extreme example to illustrate a point.
And hey, John, as well. Nice to see you in the chat. And is anyone else new in the chat? I don't think so. Okay, let's keep going.
Which is like, I could be, and this is not disrespectful to people who may have this job. Man, culture these days. So if I could also probably be a really good gas station attendant, right? I could probably be really exceptional at that. It doesn't mean that I should do it. And so just because I might be an exceptional parent doesn't mean I should. And I think that there's in the cons column, there's a tremendous amount of risk personally that the person doesn't want to do what I want them to do.
Oh, he got so close to the risk argument.
Right. And so the fact that I still have this desire that I'm projecting on an unborn child is something that I'm not very comfortable with. Because like if I had one, I would have a hard time saying that I want them to be their own person. I'd want them to be who I want them to be. And so maybe that is.
To be fair, that's a very, mature way of looking at it, like recognizing the fact that you view it that way. Because a lot of people do view it that way and don't recognize it, and they just have the kid and then try to make the kid conform. But at least he's honest about it,
Learning of becoming a parent is that you unlearn the expectations and projections that you have on the child. But in terms of like my personal like fulfillment component, I would rather like I'm very torn about it. But there's so many guys that I've like mentored that have taken steps toward me and been like, please help me with business, please help me in these ways. And I'm happy to. And, if I had to trade off, I think we were talking about dinners last night, but like the amount of time that a child takes, right? Let's say it's, 4 hours a day, roughly. But in terms of like headspace and time
Probably
spent with
more.
them.
Yeah, it'd be way more than 4 hours a day. It depends like how old they are and like if you have a nanny and stuff, but like, yeah, more than 4 hours a day.
No,
I was actually trying to be really aggressive with 4. I'm being really
No.
honest. I was genuinely being like really aggressive with 4.
I would imagine a child
Like
would be
8
like,
plus.
Well, I mean, I'm going to pay
12
help.
hours.
That's like there's going
Right,
to be
but
help
even
for
then,
sure.
it's like helping the help.
what
or the
age,
mental
though,
Let's
too?
say 8.
Because-
Let's say 8. Let's say 8
Okay,
hours.
yeah,
Okay.
fine.
8 hours.
So 8 hours a day. So full-time job, right? For the next 20 years. If I had a full-time job in the next 20 years, I could help 100,000 or 1 million people more.
When it comes to like an effective altruism type thing, this guy has a great mindset. Like he's just thinking about not serving my own wants and needs and my desires. How can I just have the biggest impact to make it a better world for other people?
Then I could just 2 that just so happen to share my genetics that eventually would get diluted out to nothing.
Is that how you base your decisions?
I
Is
mean-
off how many people you can help?
Why is this guy surprised? Oh, is this how you base your decisions off how many people you can help? Yeah. Like, is that not a good thing to base your decisions off of?
Based
Yeah.
on
Really?
Yeah. I mean, that's why where
I mean, if this guy on the right who just said that has a girlfriend or a boyfriend, they've just realized how much of a scummy mindset he has.
like a lot of people want to have kids to give meaning to their lives, right? And
Yeah, which is the Ponzi scheme point that that Benatar makes among many other people.
as a corollary to this, whenever I see a lot of people doing something, I don't think, oh, that's a great idea. I think, oh, that's a great path to mediocrity. And again, that's going to insult most people because most people do it. So this again, it doesn't have to just apply to children. You can think about it for everything, which is like if you're trying to not be in the majority because you don't want to be average, then it means that you have to, by definition, not do what everyone else is doing. And so when people are like, I'm taking this action to have children, I would assume that it's probably selfish because you can always count on people to be selfish. It's not like humans only in this one instance are selfless, right? They're selfish because they want to look at it and be like, it looks just like me. That's why I love it. You're just like me, right? I love you. I love me, right? Like,
I'm actually quite surprised that he has this much of a level-headed view on procreation and like is calling out people's bullshit. Yeah, I'm like pleasantly surprised by Alex Hormozy on this. I mean, not saying that all of his other stuff isn't good as well. Like, I do watch some of his content. I don't follow everything he does, but like he seems to put some reasonable stuff out there and a lot of like tips that seem decent for people's mindset and like approaching finance and business and stuff. But yeah, this is a good performance from him on this topic. Not that it's 100% there to antinatalism, obviously, but like, you can't expect him to be at the finish line, when like he probably doesn't even know the word.
like, and I know, and like, I'm aware of that, right? And so that's why I'm like, I try and audit. Do I want to have kids just because I want to look at a version of myself? You know what I mean? But then I'm also going to project on this kid's life when he might want to be a ballet dancer or whatever. Not that there's anything wrong with being a ballet dancer, but if I'm going to spend 8 hours, it's just like, I don't feel like I'm providing a lot of value. You know what I mean? And like in terms of,
But it sounds like you're thinking of it from an ROI perspective. Like,
Totally.
I'm going to invest all this and I might not get a good ROI compared to the guaranteed ROI I could get 8 hours a day over here.
of helping other people.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's really ROI of like the world
Yeah.
more so than me particularly. there was a brief moment where
And yeah, that's a good way of looking at things. ROI, for anyone who doesn't know, means return on investment. So like one of the key underlying principles to like something like effective altruism is just basically like, this isn't the whole thing, but this is just a part of it. Like, let's treat doing good in the world as we treat making an investment. So when we make an investment, we have a certain amount of money at the start. We put it into whatever the investment is, but we carefully select which investment we put it into because we want to get the best return on our investment. So there's this mindset in effective altruism where they say, well, so we've got a specific amount of resources and time and energy. We want to put it into doing good in such a way that it's going to do the most good that we can, manage, rather than just putting it into some local club or whatever, which isn't really going to do much good. And this is the basic mindset, and this is a mindset that obviously Alex Hormozy has, and these two guys just seem to be like somewhat baffled by it, especially this guy on the left. Like, look at his face right now. Like, he is just baffled. Like, how can this guy not be thinking about himself? Like, surely everyone is self-serving. But yeah, anyway, let's continue.
I like had an injury where I thought I wasn't gonna be able to have kids. My nut turned black, and I was like, oh, it was fine. But I was like very worried. Yeah. And so it was really interesting is that during that period of time before I got it looked at, I just was like, I'm not gonna be able to have kids. Like, that's it, right? I'm screwed. Right. And what was weird is that I ended up I became so humanitarian in general. Like during that, like it was like all of my legacy, have kid, like the
that's quite interesting because what can change someone's mind is, so when someone has the option to do something, if they want to do it, they will just find so many ways to try and justify it. But as soon as, even if there's like good like counter arguments to doing that on an ethical level, but as soon as something happens to them where they just can't do that thing, they can very quickly adapt and be like, well, they may mourn it for a bit, but someone can also just change mindset and be like, okay, well, I just can't do that now. That's not available to me. So I'm going to now swing into this other thing. And it seems like that happened to him. And like, it'll happen. It would like, it can happen on veganism as well. Like, imagine there are so many, just like excuses, justifications that people try to put forward to continue paying for animals to be, harmed and killed. And like, if for some reason, just overnight, everyone just became allergic to animal products, and so everyone had to be vegan, like, yeah, a few people would like bitch and moan, but most people would just be like, okay, I just got to make the change now. I just got to make it work, and like, whatever, let's just go forward. Let's just move forward with this stuff. It's like, and that just shows that it's like, it's not difficult. You can just change your mind. It's just because this thing's available to you and you're so fixated on it right now, you just need to break that fixation. And like, if something forces your hands, or in his case, like he had the perception that it was forcing his hand, then it can make people change very quickly. So I think once someone realizes that, they can then think, actually, well, I do have control over, like where I focus my efforts and what I'm going to do. I don't have to just be a slave to the current desires I have now. Yeah, I don't know. I just hope more people have that realization. Cool.
Desire to progenerate went from being specific to a child to general to everyone. Because like when you realize you can't have a child, then you want to still pass it on. And I think that's just like a human desire, right? Of benefiting the tribe, whatever. But like you still had this desire, and rather than being able to get my fulfillment out of one child doing that for me, it's like I was forced to just be like, well, I have to just give to everybody. And so I think that was actually a really transformative experience for me. And I think it's part of what has shaped a lot of like the thoughts around giving today in general.
If this pops up,
that was an
interesting. She, her, who won.
Oh, that was an interesting one. So Yeah, so that was an interesting one by Alex Hormozy. I was like surprised on how reasonable and like decent his opinions were on that. Um, cool. And Denver writes talking about there's a recent article about a tick that will make people allergic to meat. Yeah, so I've heard about this tick. So I've seen some people talking about it. So all of the information I'm about to give you is like secondhand. I haven't gone and like specifically read the articles. But apparently that tick, it it only works on like red meat, so like big animals like cows. So what would likely happen is if loads of people were getting bitten by this tick, they would still eat meat. They would just change to things like fish and chicken, like smaller animals, which would actually probably be worse, right? Because to get the same amount of meat from a cow, which is one sentient being, you have to kill many, many chickens, which is, you know, multiple sentient beings. So it could actually make the the state of the world worse if this tick goes around biting people, because it could just lead people to kill more animals, which is sad. But yeah, cool. Okay, and Vinemoiden's in the chat. Hey Vinemoiden. Okay, cool. I think I've got it at the right place. So let's watch this one. So this one is so if people don't know, there was this OG call-in show called The Atheist Experience, which I'm sure most people watching this will know. But The Atheist Experience was like a pioneering call-in show run by atheists where anyone could phone in and they would have conversations with other atheists or religious people, and often it would just get into like a debatey style thing. Yeah, anyway, so I don't know if that's still going now, but it seems like it's kind of lost its fame. So the most famous person who came off it was Matt Dillahunty, this guy on the left, and he now runs this show called The Line. And it seems like it's a similar thing, but yeah, just him, and he often has guests. And someone rung in to talk about antinatalism, so we'll have a listen to that. Zaki's asking if I discovered the Alex Hormozy clip like just through happenstance or someone sent it to me. I genuinely can't remember. It could have been either. Yeah, sorry. I honestly can't remember how I came across it. Cool. And Dave's in the chat as well. Hey, Dave. Cool. I think I've got this at the right point, but let's see.
Has a question or a comment about antinatalism.
Yep. Okay. Cool. We're at the right part in the video, so let's have a listen to this. I don't know how long this one is actually, because the whole video is 3 hours 20 minutes, but obviously this is just one call in. So it looks like Maria is on until I can't see. Anyway, let's.
So welcome, Maria. You're on the air on the Hang Up.
Say it again.
I said welcome. You're on the air on the Hang Up.
Oh, good to see. Good to hear you from you. Yeah, I was. I guess I think that the antinatalist people have a point, although I'm not really like trying to insist that nobody have children besides me or whatever. I think Benatar's like evaluation of the actual quality of life is. Go ahead.
Well, if you're saying that you agree with principles of antinatalism and therefore you don't want to bring.
So, just a bit of background. Actually, I maybe should have added this to the reaction stream. Maybe we'll do it next stream. But basically, Matt Dillahunty has had run-ins with antinatalists before. So back on the Atheist Experience, a few people called in about veganism and a few people called in about antinatalism. I'm pretty sure Vegan Gains once called in and spoke about veganism. But I think a couple of antinatalists have called in to the Atheist Experience. So he's aware of it before. He's aware of it already. And he actually did a video on his own channel about antinatalism, refuting it. So yeah, actually I should have included that video. We'll do it next time. But yeah, so he's aware of what it is. He may not fully understand it, you know, as most people don't, but he's aware of what it is and has had interactions with antinatalists in the past.
A kid into the world, that's entirely your prerogative. And if you're saying that you're not trying to impose that on anybody else, then I don't know that how consistent you are with antinatalists.
Right.
I did a video on my objections to antinatalism because it's really the primary argument is a bad argument, but it's fine if somebody doesn't want to have kids. It's a different thing if they think other people shouldn't.
Yeah, well, I guess I'm just not pushed enough for it then.
You're not
Well,
wrong.
no, it's not
what?
about whether you're pushy enough. It's about whether or not you believe your decision on having kids and that the basis of your decision should extend past your decision. It's kind of like, I remember I had an argument with it wasn't a long argument. It was more of I corrected somebody who said something like, people just need to understand that just because I'm pro-life doesn't mean I don't want them to have the option to get an abortion. I just don't want to have abortions. And I corrected them and went, no, that's called pro-choice. If you don't want to have an abortion, that doesn't make you pro-life. It's about whether or not other people should have that access. So Maria, if antinatalistic things have made you decide you don't want to have children, that it doesn't necessarily make you an antinatalist if you're talking about joining that as a movement, unless you are talking about presenting that in a way that would influence other people to be an antinatalist.
Actually, it could. But I need an answer to one question, Maria.
Yeah, it could just be the fact that like someone does believe it applies to other people, but they're just not confident enough to go out and advocate for it. Because I think that's what Maria was saying there, right? Like she was saying, oh, maybe she isn't pushy enough. And I think by that she means like, oh, well, maybe I'm just not like advocating for it enough that they would feel like she is an antinatalist. But it's like, no, if you have the belief you're an antinatalist, it's just like whether you advocate for it is a different thing. Do you get what I mean?
And that is,
All right.
if I
It's like when he was talking about the pro-life, pro-choice example, like there's two different things, right? There's the legal question and the moral question. You can be morally pro-life but legally pro-choice, which is maybe the person he was talking to was that, right? But anyway,
choose to have children, do you think that I have done something immoral by that decision?
Maybe slightly, but not like something I get too worked up over.
Okay. Well, if you think that what I've done is immoral, then you definitely qualify as an antinatalist. It's just that you evidently don't seem compelled to try to impose your moral judgment onto other people.
well, what does he mean by impose, right? Like no one's going around imposing stuff. They're just going around and questioning people. Like questioning someone is not imposing something on them. And also it could just be that, Maria's personality or because of her past experiences, like she's just very conflict avoidant. Like, many people are very conflict avoidant and that's fine. Like, maybe she doesn't want to advocate for something that is, a controversial opinion in public. There are things you can do not in public to advocate for the position, but these guys seem to have like this really big issue with the fact that she's not willing or not, is not like actively going out and advocating for it really in a really strong way. Like you can hold a position very strongly and not go out and advocate for it, because there could be a whole range of reasons why you're not going out and advocating for it. Like I do think anyone who holds this position should, be doing something to further it in the world or make the world a better place in other ways. But that doesn't have to be, it doesn't always have to be like publicly open thing. You can do things in private which will forward the thing as well. Like, for example, making donations to certain charities, or you could set up like a sticker business or something like that. Like no one needs to know who you are, but you can create sticker designs and stuff. There are all these sorts of things you can do. Yeah, cool.
Well, I don't know. The literature, I guess, kind of, makes arguments that I think are pretty reasonable. So that's
Well,
go ahead.
then let's do this. Let's do this because I'm definitely interested. But if you go to YouTube and you Google atheist debates antinatalism, you'll find my video on antinatalism with all my thoughts on it.
Should we actually just like let's just quickly see how long that video is, because we could actually just watch his video now, but let's just see how long it is. It's 20 minutes. I'll save it to the playlist, and we can do it next stream, because I've got a bunch of things lined up this stream, and 20 minutes is a bit long to disrupt it. Oh shit.
It would be interesting to me, and by the way, if you don't want to do this, you don't have to. I'm not here to give you homework, but it'd be interesting to me to have you watch that, compare the thoughts that I had there.
Vinemoinen's asking in the chat what the best sticker to print would be. What would it say? Well, everyone's going to have different opinions on that, but if people have like at some point, I do want to put some sticker designs together so that, and then people can order them and I can send them out to people. If people have ideas for designs or things that they want to be, like sticker designs they want to see happen, put them in the chat or email me, and I can have a think about them.
To what you found compelling, and then give me a call back to let me know where you're at after watching that. Other than that, I don't know what else we can do.
Yeah, but I mean, before you leave, Maria, I wouldn't mind hearing what you find is the most compelling. 'Cause I don't consider myself an antinatalist. I'm not going to have any naturally born children. I do think I will adopt. I actually think I want to have a couple of kids. I want to have a partner before I do that. I would want to try and do the 2-parent thing, but so but I am curious to hear because that's a lot of what we do here is ask people what they believe and why. So what is?
Oh yeah, my bloodline ends with me. That's a funny one. Yeah, that could be a good one to do.
One of the compelling arguments for you for why people shouldn't have children.
Well, I think there are a lot that.
Yeah, exactly. There's the stop having kids stickers. Actually, I'm pretty sure I have one stuck up there, but it's not in frame.
I think one of the, I guess, along the philanthropic side, the Benatar's arguments about the quality of life being dramatically lower than typically, I guess it's presented as, is one of the things that I think is very strongly compelling.
Lower than presented as. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm pretty confused.
So if we take the quality of someone who gets to live and compare that to the quality of someone who never gets to live, how is their quality of life lower for the person who gets to live?
He's just completely misunderstood what the quality of life argument is. The quality of life argument isn't saying that the quality of life is worse for someone who comes into existence, because obviously the person who never comes into existence, never exists, doesn't have a life for there to be a quality of. The quality of life argument argues that the quality of people's lives is much worse than generally recognized. In a nutshell, obviously, like Benatar expands on that massively, but yeah.
Well, the sort of thing that Benatar does there is that he.
Well, let's do you, Maria. I don't want to argue with Benatar through you.
Okay, go ahead.
Just present your position on it and your understanding. Don't allude to what you think Benatar is trying to say.
Well, I mean, overall, pleasures are very brief and not terribly intense, and pains are generally long lasting and pretty severe. So, you know, by and large, pains are vastly more worth avoiding than pleasures are worth seeking out.
Yeah, and also there's like an asymmetry in how we can accrue. Like there's an asymmetry between the goods and bads once you exist as well. Like it takes, like just as a range of examples, it takes effort to maintain a healthy body, but it takes no effort to slip into ill health. You can become ill suddenly, but it takes a long time to recover often. You know, you can be injured suddenly, hit by a car, you know, it takes ages, maybe even many years to recover to full health if you do at all. It takes a long time to learn things and gain wisdom, but you can forget all that stuff if you don't actively keep up with learning, or if you have some sort of injury, brain injury, you can lose all of that instantly. What are other things? Like hunger and thirst come without making any effort. You have to put no energy into that happening, but you have to put energy and time and effort into seeking out and finding water and food, stuff like this, you know, going to work to get the money to be able to afford to buy that stuff. All of this sort of stuff, like once you exist, slipping into suffering and unsatisfaction takes no effort at all. That is just the baseline that everything always returns to. But to stay away from that baseline and to get to the things that you now have built-in desires to want to get to, you have to actively put in effort. So that's part of the quality of life argument. It's like one of the asymmetries he talks about, one of the empirical asymmetries and stuff. Yeah.
So first of all, I disagree with that. That is the normative experience for anyone and everyone. I think there are people who have much more pleasure than they do suffering.
Well, first of all, like he's just saying that he hasn't well, I mean, maybe he will get onto it, but like he hasn't, obviously we can't go to people and exactly measure like, you know, how much good stuff have you had in your life, how much bad stuff. But there are general arguments you can make, right? Like people have X, Y, Z experiences and they are, you know, generally quite good and they have them this often in general. Like you can make general arguments and he just hasn't made anything there. But maybe he will. Let's see.
There are also people who have more suffering than have pleasure, but to put them both on like a simple balance scale that until there's more pleasure quantity or quality wise, what if a moment's pleasure is...
It's also not the case that we value pleasure and pain equally, right? Like we're much more pain avoidant than we are pain or suffering or harm avoidant than we are gaining a pleasure, right? And Brecken saying didn't sound like she was arguing quantity of pleasure pain, but quality of it. 2-minute torture leaves psychological scars, for example. Exactly, yeah. Like you can have an amazing experience. I don't know, like just the most insanely good experience. But once it ends, like you'll have the memories of it. But by and large, it can often not really change the rest of the quality of your life. Like it's just something that happens, then you have this general memory of it. And maybe it does like on an ongoing way improve the quality of life, but like a bit. But like if you have the equivalent good experience but negative, right? Like it's the equivalent magnitude, but it's on the negative side. That thing can scar you and like fuck you up for the rest of your life. And put you in years of therapy. So yeah, these things just to me don't seem equivalent. Billy's in the chat. Hey Billy, and Florin's in the chat as well. Hey Florin. Cami says Benatar also explains why we cannot accurately access our quality of life, which is why Matt simply claiming so isn't very impactful. Yeah, there's actually a video. Let me see if I've added it to this playlist. No, I haven't. But there's actually a video which talks about this a bit. Let me just get it up because I know it's very short. I actually watched it yesterday. so we can watch it because they talk about it a bit.
Existed.
Okay, let's watch this. It's only 5 minutes. Then we'll go back to the Matt Dillahunty video.
When considering the creation of people from an ethical standpoint, there are no easy answers. Antinatalism can be detrimental to well-being, and as we'll see, it's not just for the obvious reasons. On the other hand, a belief that dominates the world makes it hard to be objective and see its logical failings. Even the word natalism has taken on a different meaning, because saying that procreation is just okay is like saying nothing at all. The assumption being that if that's the way it is, then that's the way it ought to be. To question this is so subversive that even philosophers spend very little time debating the question of creating life, compared to safer areas of inquiry, like killing people with trolleys.
I've just shrunk myself so that you can see more of the stuff on the screen.
Consider utilitarianism, which measures the added benefit and the reduction in harm for all those affected by an action, and deems it morally good if the sum of these effects increases total well-being, or utility. This framework is often used to justify, even encourage procreation, based on the assumption that each life contains more good than bad, and therefore increases total utility. But when you think about it, this is clearly biased sentiment. Encouraging the creation of new people because it increases utility is like encouraging activities that require a helmet because that increases the use of safety precautions. The illusion of added value is merely the result of added need. People who never existed are not deprived of any utility, but with existence comes the price of the disutility they'll experience. This is why some antinatalists prefer negative utilitarianism, which puts an emphasis on the prevention of suffering, and the best way to minimize the suffering of a potential person is to avoid creating them. But antinatalists shouldn't have to commit to negative utilitarianism, a framework that applies to people who exist in the world and raises questions like, would you annihilate the earth to eliminate suffering? Any contrived dilemma that puts negative utilitarianism on the side of murder or some other violation of rights is very different from its use in antinatalism, where it directs us away from causing harm without consent. The action in question is unique in that it doesn't just affect someone else, it creates an unpredictable series of mental states that would never have existed otherwise. So it makes sense to take every one of these states of being into consideration, either by applying the principle of negative utilitarianism or some variation of it, or simply by asking, what if the person you create suffers to the point of regretting their existence?
So I think we're getting to the point now. So the reason I put on this video is because we were talking about how people are like often unreliable judges as to how good their life was, with the quality of life. And he talks about that, I think, in this bit coming up.
Or even wanting to end it. It's hard to integrate this kind of suffering, which we can call the unbearable, into our little calculations of the good and bad in life, or for that matter, into musings about the value of suffering. From the outside, it's hard to grasp what it feels like, because of the empathy gap. But in any case, someone contemplating parenthood at a certain point in time has no concrete data on the states of mind their potential child will face.
Exactly. So this is another thing about, it's not the quality of life argument, but I guess it's related. It's like, even if you find yourself on this spectrum of quality of life, relatively high on the spectrum, like, first of all, that doesn't justify you creating another person. Like, it doesn't logically follow. But also, just because you've been high on the spectrum, you have no idea whether your child is going to be high on the spectrum either.
Nor do they have much of their own experience to go by, with most of life still unknown, and their memory of the past unreliable, due to the intrapersonal empathy gap.
So here they're saying that humans are famously biased for how we remember past events, right? which is often why, you know, witnesses in court can often be unreliable. You know, there's all these sorts of things that people think about, like, can we exactly trust this witness and stuff like that. So people are often very unreliable when it comes to remembering their, like, the quality of their past life, let alone their present, and they have no knowledge of their future. So to make an argument against antinatalism on quality of life grounds, to me, seems like you're making an argument from the position where you don't have all of the data for what you're arguing for. And Cami is saying this is also related to suffering is subjective response also. Sure, even suffering is subjective. Your child might not be able to bear what the parent finds tolerable. Exactly.
Research shows that individuals may simply forget about earlier suicidal thoughts they had and or actions they took. In fact, it's in their interest to let those memories fade as they move on to a better place. Those who accurately remembered their previous suicidal thoughts were functioning poorly as adults, while those who failed to recall prior suicidal content appeared to be functioning better, which presents a dilemma if unbearable experiences in adolescence, for example, are what drove you to antinatalism. Do you want to lose those painful memories on the way to a happier future, in which you might betray your values and do unto others what you regretted was done to you?
Exactly. So basically what he's saying here is that, like, a lot of people will find ways of coping, right? Like, there's a lot of cope going on in people's lives. They'll find ways of coping with the harms that have happened to them in life. And because they find ways of coping with them and blocking them out, it means that they then tend to get a more positively... Sorry, I'm going to sneeze again. Positively biased worldview, which may lead them to then carry that to in informing them to procreate.
Or do you want to keep the pain as a reminder to break the cycle?
Yeah, and also when people say pain is, like, suffering is subjective, like, it is to some degree, but also, like, just put your hand in a fucking fire and come back to me and say that. Do you get what I mean? Like, a lot of the suffering that goes on in the world is not subjective. Like, put anyone in the position. So if you take someone who is suffering in a way that is very common in the world, put anyone in their situation, everyone in that situation will suffer, apart from these rare people who have this, like, genetic abnormality where they can't suffer, because there are some people who have that rare genetic abnormality, but, like, but it's only specific forms of suffering they can't experience, and it's, like, super rare.
While possibly making yourself miserable and reinforcing the stigma of the depressed antinatalist. Even if personal trauma isn't what led you to antinatalism, merely holding a belief that gets confirmed every time you notice something bad in the world can take a toll. Does the well-being of an antinatalist have to be at odds with their ethical integrity? Not necessarily. It's possible to reconcile the two sides, the negative ethics of antinatalism and a positive attitude to life, by simply remembering to distinguish between the non-existent and those that are here already. First, we consider those who never existed, when we reflect on the darker sides of life and reach the antinatalist conclusion. Then, if our conviction is based on reason and transcends the empathy gap, we can strive to minimize its negative effect, using it as a foundation to build upon in any way that is helpful and conducive to well-being. Circumstances will vary, but we can all aspire to benefit from a healthy approach to antinatalism, viewing it not as a terminal idea that stifles growth, but as the starting point of many possible paths.
Oh.
The other day,
Yeah, so it's an interesting video, right? Touches on quite a lot of things. That channel, like, has a small amount of videos, and they very rarely upload. But when they do, it's decent content. Okay, cool. I've repositioned myself, and we're back to Matt Dillahunty. So they're talking about the quality of life argument, is the topic they're on. And he's saying how he's basically making the point. He's basically making the point that you can't just weigh up the goods and bads and say, oh well, if one is more than the other, then it's justified, and if one is not more than the other, then it's not justified. Which I don't believe is what the quality of life argument is making. The quality of life argument is, my understanding is that it's basically just questioning the sort of common wisdom in society that it's questioning the common wisdom that lives are like generally up here, and it's questioning it and saying, well, actually no, they're generally down here. I don't really see people making a quality of life argument where they're saying like, oh well, if you measure it, then exactly, but it's like it's a critique of people's faulty assessments of the quality of their lives. Yeah, and Hobo's in the chat as well. Hobo saying it's a early stream. It is, and it's an early stream because I've got shit to do today, but because the weather's getting cooler. Hence why I've got a jumper on now. So the Joy Division hoodie is back. But yeah, now it's getting cooler. The streams won't always be this early, so I'll do some later on in the day as well. Throughout the autumn and winter. Cool.
Worth to someone a week's pain.
So I'm gonna have to go back to see exactly what the context of that is.
A simple balance scale that until there's more pleasure, quantity or quality.
Oh, whoa, damn right. It's 5 a.m. where they are. Whereabouts are you, damn right? And if people are comfortable saying, why doesn't everyone put in the chat where they're watching from? Because it'd be interesting to see where people are.
Quality wise, what if a moment's pleasure is worth to someone a week's pain?
He'd have to give an example, like, because you can think of a hypothetical person which would agree to such an intense form of pleasure that would then make them sign up to that at the expense of a week's pain. But you'd really have to give like a practical example of like what sort of pleasure are we talking about? Like what pleasure and what pain are we talking about as well? You know, like are you talking like a dull headache for a week? Or like, are you talking about torture? Like, do you get what I mean? Like, such a vague question. So we've got Dave is in Sweden, Chris is in Bulgaria, Futile Musing is in Romania, Billy is not in a country but asking, do you think it's always wrong to be selfish? It depends how you define selfish, but if you simply mean selfish by meaning serving your own desires, like furthering your own interests, then no, of course not. If you mean serving your own interests at the expense of someone else, then it gets more complicated. I'd have to think about it. Like, I'd have to think. If I would probably say yes. But you would, I would put it, it's like a preliminary yes, because people could maybe come up with examples of where actually you serve your own desires by, taking away from someone else, where it could be justified. But I can't think of any off the top of my head now. But in general, it sounds like, yeah, something that shouldn't be done. Chris is asking, are there any antinatalist vegans in Sweden, Dave? Well, Chris, I can confirm that there are, because I know some of them. So I actually became vegan in Sweden, and I became antinatalist in Sweden as well. And I know like a bunch of people in Sweden. I sometimes go back to visit. So like I went to Sweden earlier this year to visit. Wait, was it earlier this year or was it last year? I can't remember, but yeah, I love Sweden as a country, amazing place. And yeah, I look forward to going back again soon. And yeah, I know some antinatalist vegans in Sweden. So yeah, there are some. In fact, the guy that made me antinatalist is a vegan antinatalist in. Well, he didn't make me, but he started me on the journey, and he's in Sweden. Cool. Dan Bright is in Michigan, and the Vegan Avenger is in Canada. Billy says, I consider myself pretty selfish, not in an unethical way, by liking and serving myself the best. However, I still won't go out of my way to harm someone, including creating a new human. Yeah, I mean, I don't necessarily think that's selfish. If you're just, it's like, it's not your fault you're here, right? So like, you've been created, you are here, and you've had all these needs and desires imposed upon you that you've now got to serve. So I don't necessarily think just making your own way in life is a selfish thing. Like, it's not your fault you're in this position. But I do also think that if you do have the capacity to make a positive impact for others, to benefit others, then you should definitely try a decent effort to do that. And Dave is saying, I honestly have no idea, Chris, about whether there were vegan antinatalists in Sweden. I am only hanging out on YouTube outside of Sweden, but so far I've never come across any antinatalists, so Lawrence knows more. Yeah, there are definitely, there's a Swedish translation for the Antinatalist handbook, which was done by a Swedish guy. So yeah, there are Swedish vegan antinatalists and vegans. So yeah, it's just about linking people up. Like, I'm sure, I don't know where you live, Dave, but if you're near Stockholm, like, you would be able to do an antinatalist meetup in Stockholm. There will be enough antinatalists, I'm telling you. Chris, hey Chris as well. I'm not sure I've said welcome to the chat. Narek as well, welcome to the chat. And Narek's in Armenia as well. Thanks for joining from Armenia, Narek. Sorry. John's asking who made that video. I'm guessing you mean the short video we just watched. It's by this channel called The Graphene Rule. Let me type it in the chat. Graphene Rule. Oh. Right, that's in the chat now. So John, that's the name of the channel. Yeah, Dave's saying that he's less than 45 minutes from Stockholm. So yeah, yeah, you'll be like Dave. Just join some vegan groups. I don't know if there are any Swedish antinatalist groups, but if you join some vegan groups, post in there asking if there are any antinatalists. There will be. There's like a massive overlap in the communities, and you'll be able to find people to do a meetup with. Dave, if you do end up doing a meetup, make sure to take a group picture with anyone who's comfortable being in a picture and post it online, because it's really good. It encourages other people around the world to do meetups as well. That we have meetups in London, and we take group pictures and post them online, and people love to see the group pictures. And Dan Bright saying, unrelated, but in your years of being a vegan animal rights activist, what do you think is the most effective? I don't know what is the most effective, but what do I think is going to do most of the legwork for like just improving the world for animals and just getting them out of farms and getting them to, humans to stop exploiting them? I think the big thing that is going to do the heavy lifting is going to be technological change, like lab grown meat and replacement products and stuff like that. Yeah, I just think like people aren't going to have this ethical awakening. We have to just change out the things that they're eating, and I think lab grown meat is the best thing. Jazenko is saying that they're from Poland. Welcome to the chat, Jazenko, as well. And Jazenko drove 300 kilometers to meet another antinatalist last month. There are more vegan events without antinatalist themes, sadly. Jazenko, can you say any more about that? Like, like, were you just meeting the antinatalist for a social, or are you planning a project, or who was this other antinatalist? Were they in Poland as well, or was it you know, a different country you went to? And John's in Connecticut, and it's 5:20. Jesus, John, that's it's commitment, like Dan Bright as well. There's a lot of commitment coming from America at the moment for the early awakers. But cool. Let's continue with Matt Dillahunty's video.
I think that would be pretty atypical. I think by and large, people are not really
I didn't
able
ask.
to endure that. Go ahead.
Do you not think that each individual gets to evaluate what sort of pleasure they're willing to accept compared to what sort of pain they're willing to accept? Doesn't each person get to make that decision for themselves?
Yeah, they do, but you don't get to decide to force someone else into existence to have to make these, to weigh up these pros and cons. And remember, it's not like you just get born and you get to make all the decisions about how much, you know, good and stuff bad is going to be in your life. Like, shit just happens to you, right? And remember, like I said before, there's always that baseline bringing you down. So yeah, anyway, let's see what they say.
Oh, sure, of course.
Okay.
I just think that
So if
go ahead.
someone is fine with a moment's pleasure and trading that for a week's pain.
And Petrov is in the chat saying, what would you do if you fall in love with someone that wants kids? So I don't know if you're asking me specifically or just a general question, but I think the first thing to do is, like, when you are getting to know someone who you think you may form a relationship with, you just need to be clear with them that, like, that isn't on the table for you. So hopefully that should, like, mean that, like, issues won't arise. But it still can be the case that you're with someone who once said that they didn't want to have kids, and then later on, when you've been with them for, like, you know, many years, they then decide they do, especially if you get together when you're young. You know, people can change their mind. Like, if I was in that situation where I'd been clear about my point of view, and we get to the point where they say, you know, well, actually, you know, I've changed my mind. Well, first thing is, like, for me personally, like, I won't be able to help them out because I've already had a vasectomy. But I think I would just sit down with them and ask them why specifically they want a biological kid. Like, I would say, hey, look, there's also the option of adopting or fostering. Like, we can pursue that path. Like, that's obviously a way better path. And if they're, like, really, you know, what do you call it, like, firm on this, and they say, no, I want a biological child and I want it now, then, I mean, it's a really shit situation, but I just have to tell them, like, well, look, sorry, I'm not going to be the person who's going to be able to do that with you. So you've got to now make the decision. Do you want to make the decision to break up this relationship, or do you want to continue it and forego that thing that you want? It's a decision they're going to have to make. Like, the decision won't be on you, right? They're the one who's changed. So obviously when your partner changes, obviously in a mature relationship, you can, like, your relationship adapts, right? So it's not like people have to just stay the same all the time in relationships. But when someone changes so fundamentally, right, and it's something that you have already historically said you're not going to change on, like, this is a red line issue for you, right? If they change, then the onus is on them to come up with a solution. Either they say, well, look, I'm going to forego this and we maintain our relationship, or I'm going to have to find someone else. And, like, that does suck, but, like, relationships aren't a fairy tale. Like, sometimes they fall apart, sometimes they suck, all of this sort of stuff. So yeah, I think that's my response to your question, Petrov. JE's in the chat as well. Welcome to the chat. You may be late, JE, but it will be on catch up, so you can smash out the start of the stream later. Cool. Okay, I'm gonna continue with this video.
Who are you to say they shouldn't?
That's not what antinatalists are saying. Antinatalists aren't saying someone should not be making a decision for themselves. They're saying someone shouldn't be making a decision for someone else. Fucking hell, Matt. You made a whole video on antinatalism. You don't understand that basic point.
It could theoretically happen. I guess, the trick is, I think that it would be extraordinarily rare for that to
Wow, Maria,
be the case.
it's very troubling to me when I ask a very specific question and the person I'm talking to answers some other question entirely. So the question was, the question was, if there's a person, and we all get to decide for ourselves, if somebody decides that a brief moment's worth of pain, of pleasure, is for them worth a week's worth of suffering, who are you to say they're wrong? That was the question.
I wouldn't dictate to the individual, no.
I don't understand what you said.
Repeat yourself, please.
I'm sorry, I said I wouldn't dictate to the individual.
Okay. So if it's up to the individual to decide, then you don't get to say that they're wrong or that it's immoral or that there's too little.
What are you talking about? So he's just said, okay, so if you don't want to dictate to an individual what they should do with their own well-being, then you don't get to say that it's immoral that they can dictate to someone else that they're going to be put into this situation. Matt, you're talking about two completely different things, you melon.
Pleasure for the amount of suffering. None of those things are things you can say unless you're willing to say that the other person is wrong.
Yeah, I guess I'm.
Also, Chris just put in the chat that the H in Matt Dillahunty's name is pronounced with a K. Good joke.
I'm squeamish about going that far.
Yeah. And so, but here's the thing that makes this easier. Would you say that if...
I'm actually getting a bit like reminiscent watching Matt do call-ins and stuff, because like when I was a teenager, I used to watch a lot of atheist stuff. So I used to watch a lot of like atheist experience. Yeah. So just getting a bit, throwback vibes.
I decided to drive over to Jimmy's house and chop his head off, would you say that that was immoral?
Well, that's crossing a few lines, yeah. I'd say that's immoral.
Okay, so you're fine with saying that's immoral. I am too. I would say that's immoral. That is a situation where I don't get to...
Well, at least Matt has some standards, although he doesn't have that standard for non-human animals as far as I'm aware.
Side, because there's two lives in conflict here.
Hobo is saying in the chat that he is capping. What does capping mean?
And so if that's the foundation for moral issues, then how can someone say that having children is immoral if you don't get to decide for somebody else? It's like, for example, let's go back to abortion and the pro-choice thing. If you don't think that you should be deciding for anybody else when they should have an abortion, why? And you also don't think that you should be deciding for somebody else when they should have a baby, then how is it your position that that it's immoral?
I guess that my thought is that it's not a great world to bring kids into.
I think it's a wonderful world to bring. As a matter of fact, this is the best, apart from the fact that we might die from climate change or something else like that. This is the best of all the times throughout the world. We live in.
Right. Yeah, I've never heard that term for lying before. And there's also a video actually later on, although I don't know if we'll get to it because we're already an hour and a half into the stream, but there's a video later on that there's a very short video where this guy makes this argument about like, this is the best time to be alive, blah, blah, blah. Well, just because it's the best time relative to all the other times in history doesn't mean that it's a good time to create someone. Like that doesn't necessarily mean that it's good to create someone and put them in these positions, right? Like in in like the year 200 AD, right? Someone somewhere in the world could maybe make a claim of like, this is the best time in history, you know, this is the best time to have ever been alive, right? But Matt's making the same argument. He's now like 2,000 years later. He's saying, no, this is the best time to, you know, people can say that at any point in time. Like people could have said that back in the day when we didn't have hospitals or medicine. Do you get what I mean? It's like, that doesn't mean that it's actually an independently good standard, right? It just means that it's good relative, it's better relative to all the other things. But the other things were so bad that the bar is pretty low to be better than them.
The best possible times to bring children into it. They have the longest life, the best circumstances, the best access to health.
I actually believe that life expectancies in some places are going down, but in general they are going up. So it's a nitpicky point.
Healthcare, the most knowledge of the world. They have more avenues for pleasure than ever before. So,
I mean, J.E. saying that Matt is so deluded, like he's rational on other things, but irrational when it comes to evaluating procreation. Like everyone has their downfalls. Like we'll all have our downfall, and this is not to justify what he's saying, but it's just to recognize that like all of us have our downfalls. Like everyone in the chat watching will have their downfalls. I have my downfalls. Like he has his downfalls. Like there are certain topics that people know well and they're rational on, and there are other topics where they're just dog shit on. Like on atheism, like he's heard all the he's heard all the arguments so many times. Like he's got it locked down, right? Veganism, he's utter dog shit on. Antinatalism, utter dog shit on. So yeah, you know, we all have our things. There's more people in the chat now. If anyone is watching but hasn't said hello in the chat, definitely say hello. And also, if you haven't already said whereabouts you're watching from, then definitely let us know where you're watching from, because it'd be interesting to find out. And also, if you haven't liked the video already, definitely like the video. Gio Gaddy is in the chat as well. And Gio's going to smash the video later. What a lad. Or a ladette. I'm not sure if you're a man or a woman. Cool.
That suggests that even if it was once immoral to bring kids into the world, that now it's getting increasingly less immoral?
It could be the case that, because like the basic thing about antinatalism is that bringing someone into the world like coming into existence is a harm, right? And there are varying degrees of harm. So it could be the case that as society develops more and more and more, the harm of coming into existence lessens. But it's still a harm. Just because it's a lesser harm doesn't mean it's a harm. Right. So like he's making a somewhat valid point that like it is worse to bring people into existence in certain circumstances than others, but none of them seem to be good circumstances.
Well, I have, I guess, different expectations about, like, well, climate change and the, I guess, political.
That part doesn't matter, Maria.
Well.
There's a question tangential to what Matt just said that I think might answer it better. Is there a time in history that you think it wouldn't have been immoral to bring a person into the world?
Yeah, probably a bit ahead of now, but not too far. Maybe.
So you think a few decades ago it would? Are you saying it would be a few decades ago it would have been? I was trying to save you, honestly, Maria. I thought you were going to say, yes, the world is bad, terrible now, too terrible to bring kids into, and it's always been worse. And so I'm a universal antinatalist and we should have never done it. But it sounds like you're trying to say that a few decades ago it would have been more moral.
I think she said in a few decades.
Is that what you're saying?
Or a century ago.
Well, more moral, well, not a century, but, you know, at least after civil rights.
So
wait.
So you think there's a tiny gap?
Dan Bright is saying, is asking how old I was when I became antinatalist. I was pretty sure I was 20.
between civil rights and now, where it was more moral to bring a kid into the world?
Yeah, pretty much.
So the civil rights movement happens. Most of the things don't go in.
This conversation is kind of like divulged into like yeah, this is not where you want conversations about antinatalism to go. You want to keep it on the ethical level, not getting into the empirics of like, oh, the civil rights happened this decade and the next decade, what was the, it's just like, it just gets messy. You're just talking about like specific events in history, and it's like, it doesn't need to go there, and it means that you get into the weeds on shit that you really don't need to get into the weeds on.
To effect very quickly. Most of the things only go at a policy level, but let's say we do see progress, because we do see some. We start to see representation more, but actually representation and access to voting.
So Jazenko's just replied in the chat about their 300-kilometer journey. So they say, sorry, I'm giving more details. Also, sorry for any grammar errors. So she was from Poland and was the administrator of the Antinatalism Discord, English-speaking 140 people. I found her on Reddit, and we merged our communities, Antinatalism and her Discord. Antinatalism 2 and her Discord. Discord is still nicely moderated, and people can talk about many topics there, get some support from other antinatalists. Also, thanks to her, I found a Polish language Discord with 160 people, but they do not organize AN meetups. That's cool, Jazenko. Well, you should definitely try and initiate a meetup for sure. In Poland, maybe in the capital or some central place that people can travel to. I definitely encourage you to do that, because I know there are a few Polish antinatalists. I'm actually been in contact with a few of them, because the antinatalist handbook that I manage is being translated into Polish at the moment. So I'm in contact with 3 Polish antinatalists at the moment. So yeah, there's definitely like a decent amount in Poland. So I definitely encourage you to have a meetup. I think that people would be keen.
It's higher now than any time since the civil rights movement, but also during that entire period of time until only the last few years, if you were anything besides cisgender or heterosexual, you suffered tremendously. So right now is also the most recent best time to be queer. So as far as I can tell, a couple of decades ago, after civil rights, it might have been slightly better for...
Oh, also, just because we're discussing meetups, the most recent video I made was on encouraging people to do more meetups, but also I want to help establish some sort of platform or mechanism that people can easily organize meetups and advertise them. So if anyone has any ideas of how to do that, check out my most recent video, and it says it's called something like "We Need More Antinatalist Meetups." Just go to the video tab on my channel, and it's the most recent one. And in the description and the pinned comment, there's a link to a form. And definitely send over your suggestions on things that could help encourage people to do that and support them in doing it. And I've just realized a couple of minutes ago we had a tip come through. Saying, I won't say who it's from, because sometimes people don't like for for their name to be read out, but it says, keep up the good work. Thanks so much for sending that in. You know who you are, but yeah, it's really nice when people send in tips to support, because it's not free making all of the all of this stuff for YouTube. I have subscriptions for different things that I use, and there are just some general costs associated with it for equipment and stuff like that. So yeah, it really helps cover the costs and eases the process of making all this stuff. So thanks so much to the person who just sent in a tip. And if anyone else would like to, there's a link in the pinned message at the top of the live chat, or in the description of the live stream. So thanks so much again, and let's continue.
Cis het white men And that's the more moral time when everybody else has actually had more representation and improvement and acknowledgement of their issues. I don't understand how you measure any of this, Maria. And honestly, that started back when you said there's more pleasure versus suffering. How the fuck would you even measure that?
Also,
are we measuring
how do you-
cortisol versus dopamine? What are we measuring?
And how do you get to a civil rights movement that makes it moral?
So these people are complaining about like, oh, well, how do you measure these things? Like, but Matt was just making an argument before saying that actually he thinks people have more good stuff in their lives than bad. So like, how do you measure that? It goes both ways, I guess.
Or more moral without bringing kids into the world before that? Didn't we need kids brought into the world in the 20s and teens in order for there to be a civil rights movement?
Oh, right. So Dave is talking about it in the chat. So obviously he doesn't mind. But yeah, Dave, thanks. Thank you for the tip. It's really appreciated.
How do you get to that good without having kids?
Well, I don't think that the moral judgment would really end up compelling very many people. So, but
I don't know that we
I also
asked
kind
at
of
all
expect there to
about whether
be.
or
Go
not-
ahead.
I don't think either of us asked anything at all about whether or not the moral arguments be compelling. It's like I keep asking questions, and you answer some other question. So
I'm sorry?
if you think the window for when it might have been morally permissible started with civil rights movement, how do you get to that good window without having kids prior to that?
Well, you don't need to get to that good window. Well, also, assuming the good window can be achieved, like, let's just assume that for his argument. Assuming it can be achieved, you don't need to get to it. There's no point.
Clearly, before that, people were just doing the wrong thing, I guess.
Yeah, I don't see how that's an answer to my question. Could you have any sort of improvement in societal structure in the 1960s if people weren't fucking and having babies in the 1910s?
That's I guess no.
No. That's one of the biggest problems with antinatalism is that it oversimplifies
Well, that's not a problem with it.
things. It tries to quantify pleasure and pain, which is subjective.
It doesn't try to do that.
It tries to quantify benefit and harm, which is also a bit subjective, and it ignores the complexities of a reality where not everybody suffers, and some people need to suffer.
Wait, sorry. Not everyone suffers. Can you name one person? Like, can Matt name one person that hasn't suffered in their life?
To some extent, so that we know what a problem is, so that we can fix it and make the world better for the.
So that's the argument that, suffering can have instrumental value. Obviously, once you exist, it's good to have the instrumental value of suffering. But someone who never existed would not be deprived of that because they would never need the instrumental benefit because they have no interest for it to serve.
Next generation. Antinatalism is an incredibly oversimplistic view of the world. You're the first one. I'll give you credit. You're the first one that seems to have a window from the 1960s to, I don't know, maybe the 90s or whatever, when it would have been morally permissible or less morally corrupt. But yeah,
way worse.
I love my life.
Yeah.
I've had a heart attack, triple bypass. I have diabetic neuropathy. I have dead nerves all over my body. I have nerve pain. I live in a country where I go broke trying to pay for my health care, but none of that overshadows the pleasures of learning new things.
Okay, so the first thing is obviously you can't just use your lived experience to impose the harms and death on someone else. And the second thing is, if you had never existed, you would not care that you never had that stuff because you wouldn't exist to care, right? So the only reason that you have any need or desire for positive things is because you were created in the first place, Matt.
Gaining an understanding of the world, loving someone, having someone love you, having a good meal, listening to good music, engaging in good art. Most of my day is not miserable. Matter of fact,
Yeah, that's not what. It's just a complete misunderstanding. Like, how can someone who is generally quite intelligent get it so wrong? Antinatalists are not saying that like people are or need to be going around being depressed all the time. It's just a complete misreading of the situation.
it's very rare that there are significant chunks of my day that are miserable. It happens, but this notion that life is more misery than pleasure,
Which again is not what antinatalists are saying.
not only does that not make any sense to me, because that's certainly not my experience,
Yeah.
but while I understand it's the experience for some people, I'm okay with people having sovereignty over their bodies such that when life is no longer preferable to death, they can end their life with dignity.
Okay, well, at least he's an advocate or a supporter of the right to die. That's, that's something.
But that's an
Vinemoin is saying Matt is semi-intelligent. Okay, you got me there.
individual decision to suggest that because some people, or even most, even though I don't think that's accurate, experience great suffering, perhaps more suffering than pleasure, that somehow it's immoral to have kids is one of the most absurd things I've ever heard. Because we don't have the ability to tell what someone's life is. Here's the real problem with antinatalism. We don't have the ability to tell what quality of life any particular child is going to experience, but we can.
Oh, whoa, I've just realized there's 20 more minutes of this clip. I didn't realize this clip was going to be so long. But let's continue anyway.
Approximate it. And in the modern world, in the Western world, where we have the best access to healthcare and information and everything else, the risk is mitigated more than it ever has been. The risk of having a miserable life. But life is its own reward. And
That's so cringy. That's such a cringy say.
the person who exists and experiences some pleasure, by definition, has experienced more pleasure than the person who does not ever exist.
Yes, and the person who exists, by definition, had a need and desire for that pleasure that the person who never existed didn't have. So, like, what's your point, Matt?
And whether or not that's enough pleasure for them is up to them and nobody else.
It's like saying, imagine you have like two individuals, and one is created in such a way where they don't have the need for food. Like they they just don't have that need, right? And but then there's another being who has the need for food. Like they have to put stuff in the front end to be able to continue surviving, right? But they don't get any pleasure or anything from it. Like, just remove that. It's just like a need and a desire they have. They need to satisfy. Like, does it make sense for the person who needs the food to say, well, I'm better than that individual over there because I get to eat this food, right? Like I get to satiate my desire for eating food, my need, I get to redress the hunger that I'm going to have through this need. Well, the individual has no need for food, can just say, okay, well, it's good for you that you get food given you need it, but I don't need it. So it's like, what point are you making? Like, I just have no need for that thing. Like, I just don't have a need or desire for that thing that you're saying, right? Like that is benefiting you somehow. Like it's just a non-point.
The antinatalist position is that somehow it's immoral to bring a child into the world who didn't consent to be a part of this world. But consent is not achievable. If you stopped having children because they couldn't consent.
Yeah. And what do you do, Matt, when consent isn't achievable? You you don't take the action unless it would like serve their interest in avoiding harm, or serve their interest. Some people even disagree with this point, but serve their interest in gaining some thing that will serve their interests. But guess what? Non-existence doesn't have an interest in getting anything from you, and you can't like creating them wouldn't avoid any harm because they're not at the risk of harm when they don't exist.
No one could ever have children, which means the world couldn't possibly get better and nobody would ever experience any pleasure at all.
Better is a relative term. If no one existed, there would be no need for better. Better wouldn't even be a coherent concept.
Yeah, Maria, I just have a couple of pieces of maybe their advice, maybe they're just thoughts as we close this call out. First one is when you find somebody who has a compelling point about a perspective that seems to fit in with something like you maybe having angst already about not wanting to have kids, and then you find someone who's a presenter on YouTube or a podcast or is someone recommended to you and they sound very compelling. If you're wanting to live this life as a skeptic, you need to go find things that challenge what that compelling person said and see if it lives up to it after scrutiny.
Well, to be fair, I mean, it's a bit of a patronizing point. I mean, it's a valid point, but like it's a bit of a patronizing point. But two, why do you think she was calling into this show? Like, she clearly wants to interact with people that are going to disagree with her. So it's kind of a dumb point on his part because like he's literally engaging in the thing with her that he's criticizing her for not doing. So that's a big brain to take, that is.
Because it did seem like earlier in this call that
Dairy Fairy's in the chat as well. Hey, Dairy Fairy.
a lot of this is you're wrapped up in a specific charismatic individual's presentation of certain information. And then second, I had a second point. I've lost it. But something along the lines of.
Well, to be fair, with the big brain that he would have needed to make that first point, I'm surprised that he lost the second one.
Antinatalism in general is this sort of. I've seen people on the full spectrum of. There was one guy who was who became popular and sort of brought the term to a lot of people's attention, who basically was just using it as his popularity as a platform just to say the best form of antinatalism is knowing that you don't owe your parents anything just because they had you. However, it's nice to be nice.
Who was that? Does anyone know who he's talking about? Yeah. Hey Dairy Fairy, hope you're doing well.
Nice to them if they're nice to you, but don't feel like you owe them some great debt because they created you. That's the best form I've seen. The worst form is this elevated level of misanthropic, cognitively dissonant, almost pro-suicide thing. And the reason I say cognitively dissonant is they sort of talk about how terrible life is as though you can mathematically evaluate it and that it's not worth living, and yet they continue to go on living despite the fact one could stop. It's a very achievable goal. However, I hope nobody does it. And then also those who are at the extreme end, somewhat genocidal, even that they just think all humankind should be murdered and destroyed and all that stuff. Which
the FLS, yeah.
Well, that's not antinatalism. That's more negative utilitarianism, right? Like that distinction was made in the video by Graphene Rule we made earlier. Like antinatalism is about like preventing the harm of coming into existence. But once people exist, like if you're going to go around and be genocidal, like, and you're supposedly doing it for like altruistic reasons, it seems like the only rationale you could have is a negative utilitarianism one, not an antinatalist one.
Yeah.
So I basically the thing I'm trying to tell you is there are elements of what you're looking into that are more extreme than what you're representing, and you need to find when you come across a charismatic individual.
To be fair, that I mean, well, okay, whatever. Yeah, that's
who is resonating with you, those are the most important times to go and challenge it, because it is very, very easy to accept things that you want to hear because you're projecting your own existence. And I suspect that's some of what's going on here. I suspect, Maria, that because you suffer right now more than any time you've suffered in history, when somebody else says humans suffer more than any time in history, you just accept that as true. Or just the idea of if you just try to audit and you hear.
Also, just take note that these are all like ad hominem stuff. Like none of them these are actual points against antinatalism.
The phrase "you suffer more than you have pleasure," like a review board on an Amazon product or a Yelp review, you're more likely to notice the garbage times than the good times. And so I think you're doing an awful lot of personalizing these concepts, and I would beware. You're not doing any real harm to decide if you're keeping it to yourself that someone else is immoral for having a kid. You're just kind of being an asshole if you don't actually have a good enough basis for that belief. So I challenge you to challenge yourself and what you're taking on.
Yeah. Well, I'm kind of like not in the. I was never really going to be able to have kids, and by and large, don't really deal with too many people who are able to. So
you should drop that attitude immediately. If you want to have kids, you can have kids. Okay? They might not be biologically yours, but if you did come to the decision you want to have kids need people to make that decision. Lots of them do. About half of my siblings, unfortunately, the people who decided to take them on, I would argue maybe shouldn't have. And
yeah, so he's making like a pro-adoption point there, which is it's a fair point to make.
I would argue that maybe I would have been better off in the adoption system than the system I ended up in, but that's just me.
Brant is in the chat. Brant, am I misremembering? I might be making this up, but Brant, did you not call into something somewhere? I could have sworn that you called into a show somewhere. Have I already reacted to that, or I'm drawing a blank?
Should drop the attitude. I know it's something hard, and so I'm not saying it's easy if you have to do it with therapy or whatever. But as you are sort of retreating into a depression on the basis of I can't have children, yes, you absolutely can, and stop falling for the societal lie or cultural lie that your ability to have children is only biological, and that there is some value in only being a biological mother or father versus anything else. Definitely work on that and make the decision with that knowledge in mind.
Okay, so you called into Truth Wanted. Oh, I did react to that. That was in the last stream, wasn't it? I'm pretty sure. I'll go back and check that clip, and if I haven't, I'll add it for the next stream. But I'm pretty sure I did. I just get confused because there's been so many. Oh, okay, you don't think I've watched it live. Have you seen the last one I did of this, the second Antinatalist reactions? Oh, I did. Oh, okay, cool.
Not with this concept of, well, I can't have kids anyway, so I'm going to build some moral view around that.
Cool, yeah, Jay's saying I do. It's just my brain is obviously being fucked at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not like the most.
Yeah, Brant, so if you want to see my reaction, honestly, my memory is hazy, so I can't remember what I said. But I think it would be in the second of these Antinatalist reaction video streams.
I guess passionate about all this. It's kind of like a moot issue for me, given that the LGBT issues and so on. So this it's just not too big a deal.
But do you acknowledge that it is the best time in all of human history to be LGBTQ+?
Not for much longer.
I'm actually not sure it is, right? Like, because there have been cultures in the past who have been much more open to like LGBT type people than like a lot of the places today are, because remember, a lot of the religion, generally resistance to LGBT people tends to come from religion. So like all the mainstream religions today have only come around like relatively recently in the past few thousand years, right? Like before that there could have been civilizations that were more open to it. I'm not like particularly informed on this issue. I don't know if there's anyone here who has like researched the history of LGBT acceptance in different societies, but like yeah, I don't think you can just assume that today is the best time to be LGBT. It may be certain places in the world today, maybe like there will be certain places that are like super open to LGBT people, to the point where they're treated like people, like they are just people, right? Like anyone else. So yeah, but like if you're taking the world as a whole, it's not clear to me. But like honestly, it might be the case. I just don't know. But anyway, it's kind of tangential.
What does that mean?
I expect there are bad events coming up soon.
Okay, I think bad things are coming soon too, but I still think that overall you see a trend throughout history that the most likely course is to follow that same trend, and that we're going to see overall improvements. Like even just the option to be out and trans means that it is a better time to be trans than any point in American history, certainly. The fact that you can be out.
Well, yeah, but I mean, this guy's being super America-centric. Like, I know he's in America, but like American history isn't very long. Do you get what I mean? Like, like history goes back a long way before America was, you know, even an idea or a notion. So yeah, I mean, he you know, he could be right that that this is the best time for certain people in America specifically, but as a globe, I don't know
at all. Yes, there are obviously dangers and things that come with that.
Exactly. So Hobo's saying in the chat, just giving a range of examples of now I don't actually know these specific examples, but just a range of examples where supposedly same-sex relationships were presumably common. I'm assuming that's why you bring up these examples. But yeah, like my understanding is that there have been loads of societies that have been open to this sort of stuff. And Hobo's saying as well, not to forget Two-Spirit Austronesian. I've never heard of that. Oh, Austronesian. Do you mean like in Australia, in that area, like what is called Australia today? Usually having a rich history of transgender, etc. Yeah, exactly. Like in the past, it wouldn't have been the modern conception of transgender. Obviously, like in the past, you wouldn't have people getting like the surgeries and stuff because they just didn't have the medical advancements. But you would have had people that would like there would have been like gender norms, and then you would have had people that would buck those gender norms in whatever way was relevant to the time. Maybe they would dress differently, or you know, people would use different language with them, or you know, they would behave a different way. Like it really depends on what gender, how it was conceived of in those specific like societies. But yeah, like he's talking about America specifically, but like so he may have a point, but like in general, it may not be the case.
And I'm not saying it's good that American society is good too, but better than they've ever been. But I don't know. I guess if I can be pretty doomer myself, but it sounds like you're thinking some sort of queer Holocaust is coming.
Have you read Project 2525? Sorry, Project 2025?
No, but
go ahead.
Whether or not I can't imagine a book affecting. Go make the point that you want to make from it.
No, it's the Heritage Foundation plan for the incoming Republican president to implement in after inauguration. That's what that is.
Yeah. So
the Heritage.
Yeah, it's completely left antinatalism, this conversation now. Like originally it was on antinatalism, and now they're talking about like whether trans people are in danger in America, which yeah, it's just a different topic. So just because we've invested, so I know this is the sunk cost fallacy, but like just because we've invested so much in this clip, I'm gonna see if they come back onto antinatalism. So hold on for a minute, but let's just see. What I'll do is I'll put up the speed to 1.25.
This foundation publish it. Go ahead.
Right. Okay. So I assume you're talking about the fact that Republicans are still going to try and make queer rights and stuff illegal again, right? Not a Holocaust, but make it harder to be queer in American society.
If you count putting us all in prison as
Yes,
making
they're
it harder,
not
sure.
going to accomplish putting us all in prison, Maria. That's not something they can accomplish. They don't have most of the American people's approval of it. They don't even have most of Congress's approval, and the president isn't a king. The president can't just jump in. So as far as things they're going to work toward, playing the long game like they played with Roe versus Wade, certainly that stuff is going to happen. But it's not as though just because we might get a Vivek Ramaswamy, who seems insane enough to say something crazy like that, that they would succeed. And by the way, the moment they started locking people up for queer, just for being queer, that's when a different type of rebellion and protest happens that I'm not sure I could say on YouTube, because might sound like I'm advocating for something.
Yeah. Well, my plan is to be out of the country before the election.
You think that, where in the world do you think would be better to be queer than the U.S.? There are a couple of places that are at least as good, but parts of this country are, Colorado is probably the safest place in the world to be if you are queer. And other states like Colorado. Where is it you're retreating to?
Well, I guess the location flexibility has the UK and Ireland as alternatives.
Yeah, JE said the UK. Yeah, I guess there's the UK. I don't know what Canada's like. Yeah, like, yeah, I don't know.
But
Okay, well,
I might go ahead.
Ireland might be slightly better than the UK. But the UK, all the things that are happening in America right now are happening. I had this argument with a friend not too long ago who I had made a similar point, and they were like, well, Spain is this like progressive bastion. Spain has a party called the Vox Party that is literally the one that is growing and is trending to be the most powerful.
Yeah, I'm assuming he's going to be talking about like right-wing party or like far-right parties. To be fair, far-right parties are, my understanding is that they are on the rise in certain parts of Europe. I'm just going to skip ahead to see if they get back onto antinatalism.
Well, not wanted there. I don't get it. I just don't get it, Maria.
Yeah, well, I'm pretty clear that I may have to flee further afield than there because, yeah, I'm aware that UK is not very far behind the US. Go ahead.
No, I didn't say anything. I don't know where. So where are you going to flee to? If not the UK, presented in the lack of diversity in their population. And they'll say a lot of people in Spain speak very progressively, but this idea that Spain is this progressive haven in the world and has no issues is not correct. Not correct. What was going on in chat?
Okay, I think that's finished. Yeah, I think they just talked about like the safety of transgender people for the rest of the call. Cool. I think one more clip. Let's do one more clip before we finish. Let's look which one is best. Okay, so one interesting one, and it's relatively short as well, which is good. Actually, I'll give you a vote. So vote in the chat. So I can't create polls, can I? No, it doesn't look like I can. Oh no, wait. That's the wrong chat. Let me just let's see if I can create a poll in the chat, and we can vote. Yeah, start a poll. So what video next? So we've got two potential videos. You can either do Peter Singer on antinatalism, or we can watch a Vsauce video. I hope you all know what Vsauce is. He's a fucking legend. Vsauce on extinction. So I've started that poll. Hopefully that'll come into the chat. Do you guys see that? No. Is it coming through? It looks like it's loading. Has the poll come through to you guys yet? Where are you guys voting? How do you see the poll? Oh, because I've got it up. Oh, what? I can't see the poll on mine. I've got the poll up on my phone. I've got like the live up on my phone, and it didn't pop up for me. What the fuck? Okay, well, I guess it worked with all of you guys, and everyone's voting for Vsauce. Okay, cool. Let's do Vsauce then. Vsauce is a legend. So, okay, cool. Yeah, I don't know if you guys can see the votes, but it's 80% for Vsauce and 20% for Peter Singer. So, I'll end the poll there. Cool. Okay, so 10 people vote. Oh, okay, only half of the people in chat voted. Maybe I shouldn't have ended it that quickly, but sorry, I ended it very quickly. And we got 80% for Vsauce and 20% for Peter Singer. And I thought people would like Vsauce because he is a legend.
Hey, Vsauce.
I'm very reminiscent about Vsauce. Like, Michael is his name, obviously, but yeah, yeah, I've watched like so many of his videos. I sometimes go back and watch old ones. Like, yeah, really, really cool guy. And he did a video ages ago. Let's see, 8 years ago on human extinction. Now, this isn't going to be an antinatalist video. It's more of a fun video, but it's on the topic of extinction. So, you know, yeah, let's have a go. Did you guys enjoy? Put in the chat if you enjoyed doing that poll, and we can maybe do more of them in the future. So we can decide together which video to watch. But yeah, let me know in the chat if you like doing the poll. Cool. Okay, let's go.
Hey, Vsauce. Michael here. Do you
Oh no, wait, sorry, it's still on. It's still on 1.25.
want to be infected with Ebola without having to leave your own home or deal with other people?
Like, he's such a legend. His scripts are so good. He just comes up with this random shit like, "Hey Vsauce, do you want to be infected with Ebola?" So I'm just gonna change the screen so that we see the whole video. Boom, there. Okay.
Well, you might be in luck. You can already download an Ebola virus genome right here on the internet right now. And if you're willing to wait a few years for 3D bioprinting technology to progress a little bit, you can just acquire one then, submit the genome to it, and ta-da, all you can print Ebola. Or anthrax, or whatever it is you wish to mass produce at home to wipe out humanity. Are humans going to go extinct soon? Will human extinction be anthropogenic? That is the result of human action. Or will it be one of the good old-fashioned kinds of extinction Earth's history knows pretty well? The Global Catastrophic Risks Survey, issued by Oxford University's...
Oh, Nick Bostrom's on that. Yeah, Nick Bostrom is a pretty big figure in existential risk. I've actually got one of his books up there, The Precipice, which I still haven't gotten around to reading. I need to read it. But yeah, apparently it's a really good book.
Future of Humanity Institute.
No, wait, sorry. That's not Nick Bostrom. That's Toby Ord. I always get Nick Bostrom and Toby Ord mixed up. Nick Bostrom, I'm not sure what books he's read. He's... Fucking hell, what's going on? Books he's written.
Placed our risk of extinction before the year 2100 at 19%. Now you might be thinking, whatever, blah blah blarmageddon, it'll be okay. Humans are too smart to go extinct. Maybe you're right, but it's difficult to predict the distant future with a lot of certainty. What's really cool though is that if you embrace that uncertainty, a simple argument can show that human extinction soon is actually more probable. It's called the doomsday argument. Imagine a giant urn that contains either 10 balls numbered 1 to 10 or a million balls numbered 1 to a million. Now, you don't know which is the case, but you are allowed to pull out one ball. You go ahead and do that, and it is ball number 4. That's pretty strong evidence in favor of the 10-ball condition, because drawing a 4 from a set of 1 through 10 is a 1 in 10 chance, but drawing 4 from a million different numbers is a 1 in a million chance. By analogy, you are also a numbered ball. You are a human who knows approximately what your birth number is. It's probably somewhere around 100 billion. That's how many other humans were most likely born before you were. Importantly, you didn't get to decide which birth number you would have. So, just like the number 4 ball, you are a random sample from the set of all humans who will ever live. The doomsday argument points out that from 200 billion people, there's a 50% chance that a randomly chosen person, like you, would be born in the first 100 billion. Whereas if there will be 10 trillion humans, there's only a 1% chance that any given
I think he based this off of Toby Ord's book, The Precipice, because even though I haven't read it, I've heard a lot of people speak about it and the contents of it. And a lot of what he's talking about here seems to reflect the contents of that book. So I bet he based this video off that book. If anyone's read the book, The Precipice, then let me know in the chat. Let me know if you enjoyed it.
Say you would happen to be born within the first 100 billion. Either you are special and lucky to be born so improbably early in the story of humanity, or your birth number is to be expected, because humans will be quite different than they are today. For instance, they'll be full of more 3D printed organs. The mere fact that right now there aren't very many humans with that trait could be evidence that you aren't a random sample from the set of all humans, just from the set of all humans like you, like those around you, those born earlier in human history. Also, the doomsday argument doesn't consider the likelihoods of actual threats or human advantages over those threats in the future. It just assumes that we don't know which way the balance will lie.
It seems like the more and more technology we develop, like the more and more potential avenues for extinction and like really bad extinction we are generating, because you've got stuff like the first one for humans to cause their own extinction, like as far as I'm aware, really the first technology that came about which gave us that capacity was nuclear weapons. Someone could also argue like we've climate change. I think the general consensus is that climate change won't lead to extinction. It will just cause a lot of harm. But you've also got like engineered pandemics, AI, stuff like that. Like the more and more technology we generate, the more avenues for extinction we also generate. And like someone could say that like, oh yeah, we generate these technologies, but we can use them responsibly. Well, first of all, humans have an astounding capacity for generating technologies that they do not have the requisite moral maturity to use. So, for example, with nuclear weapons, like we generated nuclear weapons, and we were not in a state as a species to be able to use those responsibly. In fact, what does it even mean to use nuclear weapons responsibly? And perhaps even built into this is that if a species is in a position where they have the need or they feel the need to generate nuclear weapons, it's just de facto the fact that they are not mature enough to have them, because given this species is in the position where they've generated them, they seem to be the type of species that is not mature enough to actually have them. And yeah, there was something else I was going to say, but I've forgotten.
That human extinction soon and human extinction later are equally likely.
Petrov is saying, why does suffering matter if we're all dead in the end? Someone has asked me this before. They're like, oh, well, if all life is suffering and we're all going to die, then why does suffering matter? Well, I don't see why all of us eventually be dying makes it not matter, right? Like, we all agree suffering matters, you know, like, it's wrong to stab someone because it's going to cause them suffering and death and all this, you know, stuff like that. It's, you know, it's wrong to bully people, all this sort of stuff. Just because all individuals will die at some point, I just don't see why that invalidates the negative value of suffering. I just don't get it. Someone would have to explain to me why, because, like, just remove the fact that everyone's going to die. Just for example, like, another person, like my next door neighbor, will die at some point. That doesn't mean that it's okay for me to go and cause them suffering. Yeah, I honestly, when people ask me that question, I just don't understand how that question even makes sense. But maybe I'm misunderstanding your question, Petrov. So let me know if I am.
But maybe you don't believe that. Maybe you are convinced that human ingenuity will always stay one step ahead of any extinction event thrown at it. You could be right, but there's reason to doubt that optimism. For example, the Fermi paradox. If it is likely that intelligent life forms in our universe are capable of living for billions and billions of years, where are they? Why are the skies so silent?
You know, there's a range of answers to the Fermi paradox of, well, I don't know if answers is the right word, but like reasons as to why we might not be able to detect other civilizations. But someone actually put forward an antinatalist interpretation, which is just any species that is intelligent enough to get to the point where we would be able to register their existence through some sort of message they send out, they would have been intelligent enough to realize the ethical weight behind antinatalism, and they would have brought about their own peaceful exit. Which is, I mean, I don't think that's true, but it's like an interesting take on it.
Perhaps it is because extinction-level threat events are just too common for intelligent life anywhere to ever catch up. So, does this mean we should just give up? The voluntary human extinction movement.
Oh, I did not realize that Vehement was featured in this. That is so funny. Vehement is featured in a Vsauce video. Oh my lord, that is so funny. Jeez. I gotta send this to Les Knight in case he doesn't know.
Think so. Founded in 1991, its supporters believe...
Maybe this is how because I have vague memories of hearing about Vehement when I was younger. Maybe this is how I learnt about it. But I also remember seeing a BBC interview with someone about it, so it could have been from that as well. But yeah, when I was a teenager, I used to watch all of these videos. But that's so funny that they're featured.
That humans are a negative influence on Earth and always will be. Thus, we have a moral obligation to just stop reproducing right now and fade away. But what would a computer do? In a way, that's kind of what Tom Seven did. He created a program that plays video games. The program came up with novel techniques and strategies for playing games and even exploited glitches humans didn't know about, or at least hadn't told it about. He also had the program play other games, like Tetris. which I think is relevant to our question.
Oh, I think I've heard about this. I think I heard someone talk about how there was like an AI that was trained to play Tetris, and it eventually just turned itself off because it realized that it could never win, so there was no point in like playing the game in the first place. But I might be getting that wrong.
The computer struggled to figure out what to do. You see, the computer wasn't programmed to consider future repercussions far enough ahead to notice that stacking tetraminos in certain ways made a big difference. On one run, when faced with imminent demise, the computer did something eerie. Rather than lose and receive a game over, it just paused the game. Forever. Tom 7 describes the computer's reasoning like this.
So maybe that was it. Maybe I'm misremembering.
The only winning move is to not play. And that's right. If you pause a game forever, you will never lose that game. But you'll also never win that game or achieve a high score. Now, we might not know what achieving...
I think that was probably the closest Vsauce has ever got to mentioning antinatalism in a video. That's interesting. It's so interesting to go back and watch this video now that I think differently and you interpret it in a different way.
A sentient life high score in this universe means, or whether or not we're capable of achieving one. We might also sometimes panic when the future looks bleak. But if we keep playing and keep learning, chances are we could eventually figure it out and start playing really well. So, thanks for continuing to play, for being here, and as always, thanks for watching.
So a bit of a, you know, like the classic delusionally optimistic ending, but that was really interesting. Cool. So that was Vsauce. That was interesting to go back and watch his stuff. Cool. So I think that's all we're gonna do. That's all we're gonna do for this stream, because you know, yeah, we've been going for like I think 2.5 hours now, and yeah, but it's been a good one. It's been like interesting. You know, we've gone into some different topics. Like we went into, you know, LGBT and history because of that clip. But yeah, and we did the poll. So I'll do some more of those in the future. But thanks everyone for joining and watching. And yeah, I've got a video coming out on Wednesday. That is the next episode of Antinatalism Around the World. I did a poll with some options for people to guess which country is going to be next. Because you guys all turned up to the stream, I will let you in on which country it's going to be. I haven't checked the poll. In fact, actually, let's check the poll now and see if people got it right. Because last time I checked, people were actually doing quite well in what they were guessing. So, cool. Let me share the screen again so you guys can see this right. So I asked people to guess which country is next. So the most voted for is Israel, and people are correct. So the next episode of Antinatalism Around the World is coming out this Wednesday, and it's going to be on Israel, which was a super interesting episode to record. I'm looking forward to it coming out. Definitely stay tuned for that. So there's a little insider for you. But yeah, thanks. Thanks everyone for coming and watching. Thanks everyone for engaging in the chat. It's been great to see the chat active and people talking to each other. It's so much nicer doing a stream when the chat is active than when it's not really active. But yeah, thanks everyone for joining, and I will see you all in the next one.